Good evening, everyone. My name is Celeste Lacabra. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today I wanted to do a in-depth review and analysis of the new film from Zach Cregger entitled Barbarian. This one came out pretty recently, and I saw it in the theater a little less than 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I guess right off the bat, I want to say that this is going to be a spoiler-filled review. So if spoilers aren't your thing, if you care about that sort of thing and you haven't seen the film yet, I highly, highly encourage you to go ahead and watch the film. Should be streaming on HBO Max soon. And then add this video to your watch later playlist and come back and watch this after you've seen the film. It's a great, great film. I promise you won't regret it. And do me a solid and add it to the watch later so you don't forget about me. And we can have a discussion about it once you've caught up and seen the film yourself. Okay, so with that out of the way, I do want to go ahead and give one more little disclaimer in that I saw this in a theater and it's been a couple weeks at this point. So if I get any minor details wrong for whatever reason, I do apologize. The basic core thematic analysis that I'm going to be presenting shouldn't be affected in any way, but if there's any major mistakes I've made, feel free to let me know in the comments, and then we can talk about it and reassess. But I think I have things pretty much right, so let's go ahead and talk about it. So I first became aware of this film when I went on my Letterboxd and saw that some film called Barbarian was the top film of the week, and I clicked on it, saw that it was a horror film, saw that it had an extremely high rating, and I was like, cool, this looks good. And then who do I see but Zach Cregger as the director? Now, I've been a big fan of his work ever since I was a kid, because, you know, I've been a huge fan of The Whitest Kids You Know for years and years and years, and, you know, I've always been a big fan of his, you know, his writing and his comedic timing and his acting in general. You know, it was a huge surprise to see that he was, like, directing this big, or his really successful indie horror film, but it made me really happy to see him be so successful, especially in the wake of Trevor Moore's death, which was just something that really affected me, and I think really affected a lot of people, and it must have affected him quite a bit. I was very taken aback, but I really couldn't be happier about it. Now, there are so many twists and turns to this film that I really can't do a concise summary. I'm gonna go ahead and try to give a basic, like, synopsis, but you know, hopefully we've all seen the film if you've made it this far in the video, and you can fill in the gaps in terms of the plot when we talk about the analysis. In terms of the basic, like, plot synopsis, it follows a woman named Tess. She's a career woman who rents an Airbnb that turns out to be double booked by a man named AJ, who is a landlord and a Hollywood actor who has just been fired after being accused by his co-star of rape. She finds Bill Skarsgård's character in the house because he's the other person who has been affected by this double booking, and they kind of become friends, despite the fact that he kind of seems really creepy at first. At a certain point, she finds a hidden, like, crypt in the basement where there's clearly been, like, years of severe torture. When she informs Skarsgård's character of this, he doesn't initially believe her, and he goes to check it out for himself, and she follows him and watches him get brutally murdered by like a 7-foot ample-breasted, fully nude, deformed creature. So after that, we kind of just follow Tessa's character as she unfurls the story of the basement and fights for her own survival. So the main theme that I feel is at play in this film is the violent legacy of patriarchy and misogyny. So let's go ahead and analyze this from a few different angles. Let's talk for a bit about AJ's character. He is, like, straight up a rapist, and yet he's one of our principal characters. This is a pretty unusual and bold choice, and from what I've read, when people got the script, this was one of the things that kept getting it turned down and, you know, almost prevented the film from being made, as they didn't want to spend, you know, X amount of pages on the script following a rapist, which is understandable. However, in the film, I feel like he's portrayed as, like, a real person with genuine complexities and not just like a cartoon villain. However, this isn't to say that Cregger lets him off the hook in the script in any way. His deeply ingrained misogyny, capitalist excess, and macho bullshit are all played both for laughs and for gasps throughout the film. At the end of the day, he is still a ridiculous man who is quite capable of causing great harm. Now, AJ is kind of compared and contrasted to Frank, who is the man who is discovered to be the original owner of the house and who has been violently raping women in the basement for years. Frank kind of represents the old guard of patriarchy and misogyny. He captures, rapes, and tortures women with impunity, systematically over the course of decades, and it seems to be an open secret in his community. His behavior is like very black and white and clear cut in its heinousness. On the other hand, AJ kind of represents the newer, more subtle forms of violence against women. He rapes a woman without really understanding why what he did was wrong, and he blames her. He's constantly using really misogynistic language and like sheer vitriol to describe her. There's a really telling scene where he describes to his friend what happened, which is kind of like this safe place of like male privilege and patriarchy where he can actually be honest and doesn't necessarily have to face up to the consequences. Like his friend even tells him like, bro, you can like just tell me what happened. I'll be on your side. I'll believe you no matter what. And in this scene, he seems to kind of understand that she didn't initially consent or welcome his advances. However, in his mind, that isn't a deal breaker or the clear signal to stop. But instead, it's sort of like a challenge for him. In his mind, rather than an aggressor, he's simply a persuader. AJ here represents a microcosm of patriarchal misogynistic society that teaches men to obtain sex and treat women as objects rather than respect their boundaries and autonomy. He's horrified when he finds the videos of what Frank has done. I believe the videos are just straight up of him raping women in a way that is very overt and violent. And he seems to briefly come to the realization that he has caused harm in similar ways, but perhaps unfortunately, perhaps predictably, he kind of immediately reverts back to selfishness, and he doesn't quite literally throw a woman under the bus, but he throws Tess off of a building to save his own skin and escape. However, once he finds out that she's actually alive, he immediately goes back to making excuses and concocting a narrative where he doesn't have to live with himself as the bad guy. So to me, misogyny and patriarchy, again, are the primary themes that are explored in the film. Even the kindest man in the film, which would be Bill Skarsgård's character, he still commits many microaggressions throughout his time in the script. In the initial conversation that he and Tess have together, where they're kind of bonding, he makes a few comments. I don't remember exactly what they were, but I remember Tess having to say something to the effect of like, look, you're a man and you just don't get it. Like, these things that I'm describing to you, these things that I've suffered, you don't relate to them and you don't understand them because you're a man. Later, when she tells him the very real danger that is downstairs, rather than believing her, he has to, he can't just believe a woman. He has to go downstairs and investigate. And it's what ends up getting him killed. To me, this all kind of culminates in the big final reveal at the end of the film. The creature that is downstairs that kills Bill Skarsgård and AJ's character, she's not some kind of like supernatural creature. She's simply a woman and a victim. She's a product of generations of rape and incest. I believe in the script she's referred to as the mother, and the mother is the physical manifestation of decades of violence against women. She doesn't become the way she is because of some inherent evil, as we're kind of led to assume, but rather she's a product of her environment and of her circumstances. In one pretty simple reveal, the character who has been the primary source of terror the entire film instantly becomes a character that the audience pities and sympathizes with. The final scene where she is killed at last, rather than cathartic, it's just heartbreaking. So one technique that the film utilizes over and over again that I think is really effective and I really enjoyed was the way that Zach Cregger uses bait and switch, both in how he directs the film and how the script is written. It's used constantly as a narrative device throughout the film, and it is constantly subverting expectations. In the beginning of the film, Bill Skarsgård is the obvious villain until he's not. The homeless man that runs and screams at Tess is scary and crazy until he's not, and he's actually the most sane person in the whole community. And the mother is a source of terror until she's a source of sympathy. These are just a few examples that come off the top of my head and make some pretty big changes to the way the audience interacts with the film and perceives its characters. So another important bait and switch that I wanted to talk about is the introduction of police. Societal expectation and the narrative framing sort of prepare the audience to expect the police to be a source of help and relief for Tess when she finally escapes and goes straight to them. She makes it out and goes to where society teaches us to go to when we need help. However, as some will expect, they are less than useless. They antagonize her, don't believe her, and treat her as if she's a crazy person simply because she looks dirty and disheveled. and is saying things that don't immediately make sense to them. Let's also be honest, her status as a black woman causes the police to easily and immediately distrust her and write her off. Rather than put an end to the generations of violence in their community and make a breakthrough discovery, the police do what they do best and let the violence continue uninterrupted. It also feels important and intentional to me that one of the officers is a black man. Despite his shared status with Tess as an oppressed minority, as black people, he still works for an institution that upholds white supremacy and patriarchy, and his status as a man makes this easier when he's dealing with a black woman. So those are the main points that I wanted to touch on today, and that's sort of the bulk of my actual analysis. I would personally give the film an 8 out of 10. I think it's really great, and it gets a very high recommendation for me, for horror fans especially. Now, unfortunately, Searchlight is the distributor here, which means that it's owned by Disney. And they've pretty much made it clear that it's not going to get a Blu-ray release, which is fucking bullshit. Like, it made back like 10 times its budget and is a very fresh, scary, excellent film. And it's just going to be relegated to like the bowels of HBO Max or like Amazon rental, where it'll be so much more easily forgotten. I don't know, a film like this deserves preservation, and it deserves a spot physically in people's collections. So Disney, put out a fucking 4K, or at least a Blu-ray. Jesus Christ. So that's all from me today. Please like the video. It's free and it's easy, and it would be doing me a huge solid, and I would really appreciate it. It helps others find my channel, so if you liked this, then please hit the like button. Thoughtful comments are encouraged. Please let me know your interpretation of the film, your opinion of the film, and what you think of my analysis. So I'd like to have a, ripe and robust discussion here in the comments. One of my primary goals in doing this channel is to try and foster a supportive, kind, and inclusive community, and I really love engaging with my audience. So thoughtful, kind, and engaging comments are highly appreciated. Please subscribe to the channel. We're getting very close to our goal of 500 subscribers, which will then allow me to utilize this lovely community tab and interact with you all even further. So that would be great. I have other analyses of film and TV here on the channel. I recently did one about that new Jeffrey Dahmer series that has been doing really well. So if you enjoyed this, go ahead and check that out. I also do lots of content about physical media, the Criterion Collection, Vinegar Syndrome, art films, sleaze, etc. And I try to be thoughtful and entertaining at the same time. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, there's plenty of content already on the channel, and there's plenty more coming in the future. So please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell if you want, but I won't pressure you. And come hang out. That would be really cool and fun and hot and sexy of you. There's also links in the description for my Letterboxd, Instagram, and Rate Your Music accounts. And that's it for me today. So hail horror, hail Zach Cregger, and hail Satan.